A lot of you listening have probably heard a lot of hype about AI recently, and we're here to tell you that the hype is real, especially when it comes to data use cases. ChatGPT is just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, the recent innovations in AI might be bigger than the emergence of the internet. Sounds like a bold claim, but hear us out. My name is Gnibus, and I'm a Technology Solutions Marketing Manager at Alteryx, where I think about how a full analytics stack comes together with Alteryx and other technology platforms. Today I'm here with Ahmad, Head of AI ML Strategy at Snowflake, who's going to tell us what he's seeing in the AI space. We're going to start by talking about how we got where we are today with AI, what it means for your data use cases, and how you can get started with AI today with Alteryx and Snowflake, even if you've never built a machine learning model in your life. All right, Ahmad, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. So let's go ahead and start by having you tell me a little bit about your role at Snowflake and how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna go a little bit back, and back in 2014, I was at AWS, and I went to one of the talks that was delivered by a research scientist about machine learning, and I think that day just really changed my life. Like I was smitten by like machine learning, its capabilities, and then I became sort of a subject matter expert at AWS, worked with various teams. Initially, there was an Amazon machine learning service, and then I became part of the early previews of the service that eventually became AWS SageMaker, which is, AWS's main machine learning service today. Then delivered talks and boot camps at reInvent, their AWS's main conference, and worked with some of the largest customers. And so when I landed and came to Snowflake, we had all this data of our customers. We weren't doing anything with machine learning and AI at that point. And so I helped create that workload at Snowflake. And now we have an exciting, roadmap and a full set of features that enables all roles. And so in my role today, I work with some of our largest customers that are running machine learning and AI on top of Snowflake. And then internally, I work very closely with our product and engineering organization, sort of defining the vision and strategy. And that really includes two things. What native building blocks should we have in Snowflake? And then what are some of the key partner integrations we should be building with the leading tools out there? And one of those tools is definitely Alteryx.
Awesome. So you really have been hands-on with AI technology since all the way back in 2014, and you've been actively building and shaping this technology and making it available over the past several years. So you've witnessed firsthand kind of the evolution of AI, and it feels like things have
Yeah.
really snowballed recently. So I wanted to ask, between ChatGPT and all the other technologies popping up, it feels like the barrier to entry for experimenting with AI really just dropped out of nowhere. People are calling it the iPhone moment for AI.
Mhm.
So I wanted to talk through what just happened in the past few years and even months or this week.
Yeah, yeah, I know. You're absolutely right. Like it's progressing so quickly, right? And it's just seems like when I talk to my friends, some of them will say, "Hey, like this just popped up, like probably in like November, December of last year, out of nowhere." And I've been involved in this space for a while, and I can tell you, like this has been slowly evolving. And what has happened with ChatGPT and now GPT-4 is really this is the point at the end of 2022 and early 2023 is where sort of machine learning got to a point where it captured the public's imagination. And that's what's happened. But really the innovations that have been happening, you can go probably all the way back to 2010s, early 2010s, where, with the AlexNet competition, that was shown that large amounts of data combined with very large neural network could solve very complicated problems, such as, object detection in images. And even before that, there are multiple waves that are coming and sort of joining in to create the tsunami. And there it's the proliferation of like cloud computing. So easily, being able to like store large amounts of data, access to large clusters of compute, where I don't have to go buy the compute. I can rent it from cloud computing platforms. Usage of specialized hardware such as GPUs that enables faster processing, the linear algebra, the math behind machine learning that just made it faster. And then there were obviously some advancements in algorithms as well, some key advancements in algorithms and usage of large neural networks. And so this has been going on for a while. And, the key seminal paper that came out in 2017 was titled "Attention is All You Need." And that was the basis of this new architecture of how neural networks are arranged. And that led to really like next level performance on natural language processing. And that's where sort of you see the emergence of ChatGPT right after that paper came out. So it's been going on for a while. It's just that the public at large was not exposed to the research or the academic side of it. And so now we're definitely at a platform shift here. And I would definitely agree. Like this is, in my mind, at least, in my humble opinion, this will have a big impact on our world, perhaps even bigger than the internet.
It's crazy. I feel like it's just me and a computer, and I could start building with AI because of the recent developments that have happened. And you mentioned large language models, which people refer to as LLMs. And I've heard the word llama thrown around. I know that was a big development. There's a llama in the wild. So can you tell our listeners, maybe explain what an LLM is and why that was so significant?
Yeah, so large. I mean, there are a bunch of this terminology being thrown around, like large language models, there's generative AI. Ultimately, these are what you're doing is deep learning, which is essentially large neural networks, and you're leveraging large amounts of data, and you're training these large neural networks using GPUs. Essentially, that's what it is. And this new capability is really driven by the transformers architecture. So transformer architecture is really enhance the performance of these models to a next level. And then there's, of course, some new innovations brought about by OpenAI as well. Definitely the maker of ChatGPT, where they've introduced, okay, so I do the pre-training. There's like different ways of training that are sort of chained together. So I pre-train a model, and you might have heard like, look, at the foundational level, these models are essentially predicting the next word. Well, that's true, but that happens in sort of the first stage of that. The second stage is when you train the model to follow instructions, right? And then there's a third stage of reinforcement learning with human feedback, where the model is producing multiple outputs, and there's actually a human in the loop saying, hey, no, this is not a good answer, this was the good answer. And then the model gets rewarded there. And so that was sort of the key innovation. The question about llama was, llama was a paper that was produced by, I believe, Meta, and they uploaded the paper and the code. Now the big thing about training these, the barrier to entry to getting your hands on a model is really the amount of compute and amount of money that you're spending, right? Like I think there were figures around like GPT 3.5, it would take maybe $25 million to train that. And then some are saying, hey, like GPT-4 is like $100 million or more to train that. And so what you get at the end is like really weights, right? So the weights of the model, and those were somehow leaked, and they were put on torrents and 4chan and whatnot, and people then started building from that. So once you have access to the weights, you can load the weights up, and you can then fine tune the model. And so there was some controversy around, hey, like any work that uses the llama weights is not fair game, right? And so we see that, and that sort of started like the open source side of things, right? You have the commercial LLMs like, GPT-4, and, you have Anthropic and others doing this commercially. But on the open source side, like Llama sort of started that, but now we have like multiple players that have gotten involved. And what we are seeing is a lot of interest in the open source models as well, because a lot of our large customers want to take those open source models, perhaps the smaller models, and then train them fine tune them in a private environment on their own data and use them for very specific business tasks. So there's definitely interest in that. And then over time, I expect that there will be, a plethora of commercial offerings, but I do expect the gap that exists today in the quality of open source models and the commercial models. I think that's going to get narrower and narrower. So
So there's a llama on the loose, kind of opens the door for more open source collaboration. And suddenly it's now much easier to start working with AI and solving your own problems and experimenting on your own without needing access to the resources that you normally would have needed access to. Sounds a lot like the advent of cloud computing and also what Snowflake has done in terms of making things more accessible and opening up those resources. So thinking about what that means for Alteryx customers and Snowflake customers who are thinking about this for data analytics, what does this mean for people who want to start experimenting with AI for data use cases?
yeah, I mean, the possibilities are really endless, right? Like we're at the beginning of this. And, when I used to talk to customers about classical machine learning, your like regression use cases, and you would talk about essentially what you're doing is, you're looking at like historical data and then you're trying to predict something about the future. But like when you take like, deep learning, machine learning AI and LLMs, this is really enabling newer kind of insights from newer kind of data set and data that we've never even looked at. I was looking at some statistic that like at any typical company, more than like 80% of the data is unstructured,
Wow.
right? Like we've been doing analytics on like, structured data only. And so it's not just about doing some kind of simple like sales forecast anymore, right? Like that, those are very important things to businesses. But now this enables newer kind of insights from all this like unstructured data that has been untapped so far. So think about how you can have maybe a corpus of support call recordings and you unleash an AI agent on those call recordings and transcribe them to your maybe primary language, human language, maybe English or French or whatever. And then you unleash another AI agent on that to get the sentiment out of it. And then you're building a sort of a dashboard and Alteryx or whatever, right? And saying, hey, like, give me the customer sentiment day by day. And you're building. So essentially what you're doing is like you're going from like unstructured data, structured data, and then vice versa as well. And so there is now emerging like what this has done is really taken machine learning and AI from academia and now created a commercial stack. And when we say like stack, there's like, lower level layers in that stack that are really meant for like people doing this at scale, people doing this at industrial scale. They understand how the neural networks work and can code them in Python or C++ or whatever, all the way to the high end of the stack where you now have these SDKs like LangChain being developed. And so for everyday programmer can go in and create these amazing applications very, very quickly. And I think for the non-technical persona as well, this enables them, not only you could generate code, so you can like build a lot of stuff. And then what I foresee is features and functionality in all sorts of tools where you would be able to give a prompt to the tool and it will generate and it will do things for you. But not only that, but based on what you're trying to do, the tool itself will maybe inject a prompt and use an LLM in the background to generate something for you. And so these are like newer kind of patterns that we are seeing in the space. So I would say the possibilities are endless. And like if you're somebody technical, it makes you 10x more productive or 100x more productive. And if you're somebody who's non-technical, it also makes you a 10x more productive, right? So, and a lot of people like there are people saying now, hey, like no, maybe some startups you don't need a founding team. It's you could be a solo entrepreneur and just get started very very quickly because you can build all of this stuff using Chat GPT, GPT-4, and other tools. So very exciting times.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever watched the show Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah. This reminds me of the hot dog versus not hot dog app,
Yeah,
right? We've come a long
that's
way
right.
since then where
That's right. We
a
have.
technical person creates an app that can identify whether food is a hot dog or not a hot dog.
It is. And I actually remember one of our like example workshops was a derivative of that episode or like that team in Silicon Valley because that's what we trained a model to do was to recognize a hot dog and people found it amusing but then they learned a lot too.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's a,
it's
an
wild
amazing
then.
show, amazing show.
I love it so much. I need to go rewatch it now, but that's what it reminds
Yeah,
me of because there you have someone who put a lot of work into that, right? For this, somewhat simple functionality that was kind of the joke of the show. It could only do one thing. But now, if you think about the both spectrums of the stack that you just outlined, you have people from different roles, different backgrounds, different skill sets at either end of that spectrum, from technical coding languages to non-technical. And either way, you could still be doing very impactful things with AI beyond hot dog versus non-hot dog, although that may
that's
be
right.
useful in some situations.
it, there might be an app very soon, right?
I mean, it sounds like maybe I could make that at this point with just
You
me and a
could, you
laptop.
could. That's right. You could. Yeah, very easily. Just prompt it the right way. And
Yeah.
so now like their new roles, like a lot of people have been talking about the prompt engineers, right? Like there's skill in that. Like how do you talk to these AI agents, right? Like if you prompt them the right way, if you prompt them one way, you maybe get like a paragraph, and you prompt them another way, you get like detailed instructions on how to do something.
And it kind of goes back to what we like to talk about with Snowflake and Alteryx, where we support workers who, even if they don't understand or if they don't know a coding language or have the specific skill set, they can start getting upskilled on best practices for knowing how to interface with these new technologies. And so, if we're thinking about, let's just take Snowflake and how Snowflake is supporting data workers, what are some ways that Snowflake is starting to get into AI, help businesses develop use cases and some more capabilities?
For our customers, Snowflake is sort of the main repository of data, right? And so think of Snowflake as the central place where you can bring all sorts of data. So initially, when Snowflake started, it was all about structured and semi-structured data. So tabular data, right? And then JSON, XML data. And what we've done over the years is also enabled unstructured data. So you can throw in images, audio, video files, text documents into Snowflake as well. A key piece there is you have to be able to govern that data because AI intelligence is everywhere. It's probably going to get commoditized. What's not going to get commoditized is your data. And so your data is very, very valuable. And so first you have to have a cohesive environment where you keep the data governed and give the right access to the right people in a timely fashion. So that's really key for large organizations. The other thing is maybe I want to transform and process that data in the same environment as well. And so what we've also done is enabled like compute building block. And we're expanding that. And this year you're gonna see big announcements at our summit around this. First building block was obviously SQL, and then we've added with Snowpark, Java, Scala, and Python. And so all these are sort of building blocks on how to process that data. So storage of data, then governance of data, and then processing of data. And then investing in key partnerships is really key. We are not good at developing auto ML tools. We're not good at developing like visual tools. And that's really where our partners like Alteryx comes in. So we are providing programmatic interfaces. So there's a bunch of people that are using Snowflake today, and I'll talk a little bit about the persona, if I may. The data analysts that are writing, of course, SQLs, the data engineers that are writing stuff in Python, data scientists that are writing stuff in Python, and then also analysts that are leveraging our SQL functions as well. That cannot, but we are making available some AI and machine learning functions that are pre-built for those personas as well. And I think where Alteryx really complements Snowflake is the UI components, where there are personas such as like business analysts and other personas, even data scientists like to go and experiment very, very quickly with visual environments as well. And so at large, whether it's through SQL or through Python or Java or Scala, we're exposing at Snowflake programmatic interfaces. So it's very easy for you to do anything with your data, including machine learning and AI and large language models. And then, we're leaning on partners like Alteryx to enable that for other personas where you can use, a UI to build these workflows very, very easily. Yeah, like I said, like, I mean, you can do newer things. I was looking at our core engineering, prototypes the other day. And one of the things was like, you talked about what are the new things that are getting enabled. One of the core things is how do we enable the self-service of data through business users as well. And LLMs just take it to the next level where, you're coming in as a business user. You can even ask the LLM, hey, what are some of the interesting questions I can ask this data? And so you're essentially giving the LLM some kind of information about your data, some metadata, or maybe some examples. And it will give you a menu of questions. Hey, here are all the interesting questions. So it's really taking it to the next level, right? For all different kinds of personas.
Yeah, and that's where that business domain expertise comes in because someone who understands the business problem at hand is the person ideally suited to be asking AI these questions, right? So it's no longer
Mhm.
just the technical person that has to be the one interfacing with AI. It can be someone who understands the business challenge. And now they
Mhm.
suddenly have access to this technology that can accomplish a lot more high value advanced use cases that would have previously been out of reach. So it's cool to see how Snowflake and Alteryx are both coming together, building together, getting the right people, the right data at the right time. And at the same time, Alteryx is making it easier for more people to utilize that data. And I know Snowflake also has ways of getting the actual data sets that you need, right? Because with the Snowflake data marketplace, for example, suddenly it's more accessible to access third party data sets that can augment your insights for even richer findings.
Yeah, like people sort of over index on the models and the performance of the model. It's important, but they underestimate the value of data. How do you think models like ChatGPT or GPT-4 train like it's massive amounts of data, and they probably spent so much time gathering all that data to train their models on. And so that's where the human intensive part, right, of training a model. So it's all about like sort of data center. We call this data-centric AI, which is data is the number one ingredient into AI, into machine learning. And one of the key components there is the ability to bring in these third-party data sets. And so a lot of times when you have your first-party data, but then you want access to these like third-party data sets, commercial APIs. And so what we were finding was the people were like spending so much time setting up infrastructure to consume from those APIs, or we're just doing file sharing. So this marketplace in our data sharing technology really replaces that, where you go into a marketplace and say, hey, I want to subscribe to the weather data. And that's like a perfect example. It's so easy. And some of our customers, in fact, I was talking to this customer, joint customer of ours called Vantage Data, that is exactly doing that. So their whole business model is they're giving these insights, metrics, and signals to their customers that are retail and CPG customers. So they have their own data that they provide, but then what they're doing is they're bringing in weather data, joining with their first party data, and then they're monetizing their data off stream. And they're transforming all that data in Alteryx by using Snowflake as the repository of their first party data, and then using Snowflake Marketplace to pull in all the weather data. And so now you have a brick and mortar store. You can better predict, like, if it's going to be raining, fewer people are going to probably go out and what. But you get the point. Like, I mean, there's demographics data. There's I would say probably now thousands of high quality data sets by companies whose whole business is to produce high quality data set. And so this is a great example. I think, this capability of bringing the right data sets in very, very quickly becomes more and more important in this day and age, in this age of AI.
Yeah, and I think people underestimate the importance. I know many people, many people listening to this have heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out, but that becomes even more important, I think, with AI and machine learning. And oftentimes people tend to over index on just getting quantity over quality, right? They think that if they just have a bunch of data, that'll be better. But I think now we're starting to understand with the emergence of LLMs and new techniques for working with AI that actually more curated, high quality data sets are very important. And I think that's where Snowflake Data Marketplace is really important and helpful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like, and I will double down on the governance aspect of it. You have to guard your data, and then the models you produce as well, right? So what are you doing to do like role-based access control of models? You don't want your models getting in the wrong hands as well. So protecting those models is going to be key. There are customers that are thinking about like, hey, like, should I be exfiltrating this data out of my governed environment, sending it to a publicly available API? There are all sorts of issues there as well. So I think there's going to be use cases where these models are trained in private environments, and then you have to really think about the model lifecycle and how to not govern just your data, but also the models that are being.
Yeah, there's a lot of needing to make sure the right people have access to the data itself and the access to models. And I think that's where Snowflake and Alteryx also have a really strong benefit of being able to ensure data quality at each step and to ensure that the right people have access at every stage while also enabling self-service. And at the same time that you have a lot more flexibility and creative exploration. So if you're able to get your hands on the data you need, you can get started on building. And I think that there are so many different ways you can use Alteryx to get started with AI. You can work on that data quality like what we were just talking about, right? That those early stages of making sure that if you need to prepare a training data set, you can automate it using Designer or Designer Cloud, and that gets you to the results
Mhm.
faster. You can then put that data set in Alteryx Machine Learning. You can combine it with data from Snowflake Data Marketplace. So there's so much connectivity between the two platforms that I think it's the perfect tee up for being able to go in and just start working with it yourself in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in order to learn all this new stuff, like the best way is to just play with it, kick the tires, and I think that the two tools there are going to be super beneficial. And the other thing I like about Alteryx is it gives you the programmatic access as well. So for any of the the technical personas, they can of course go and go code this stuff. Non-technical personas go and like use the designer, use the machine learning capability, both in Alteryx and then in Snowflake. We have these functions that are super easy to use without requiring you to like program in Python or anything like that. So lots of things where, and we're also making it easy for our customers integrate Snowflake with external APIs such as, GPT-4 and other commercial vendors as well. So that's something that's pretty excited about. We're going to be talking more about it at our summit. And then I'm going to be also at Alteryx Inspire as well very soon. So pretty excited about that as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you there. So, thinking about just to wrap up here, the different ways that you can use Alteryx and Snowflake to get started with AI, what would you suggest for someone who doesn't know code and is super new to AI in general? Where might they get started?
I think they're very like simple use cases there that you can get started. The number one I think business right now is definitely like forecasting. If I was someone who was just getting started here, start with the most simple applied machine learning. Yes, it's like it's great to like get mesmerized, and you already know what Chat GPT can do, but what is being applied in business today? It's stuff like, simple time series forecasting or regression or classification. In fact, you can do some of those things in classical ML and then in deep learning as well. And so use like built-in to do forecasting. I think that's one of the, and when I talk to customers, a lot of our customers, our joint customers are still in the early phases of operationalizing even the classical machine learning as well. So to be able to better forecast things, to be able to better predict churn of customers, these are very, very common use cases. And you see out in the market, there are companies that are really good at doing this stuff, and there are others, many others that are not doing this well. So look at these use cases that are being applied in business today, and I would get started there. And that builds a solid foundation where you can go more and more advanced and see what like the latest AI techniques, and it'll give you insight on how to apply the latest AI stuff. Because I'll tell you this, like if you were to ask me what are some, I'm telling you some examples that I've heard from other people as well. Like people are figuring this stuff out. It's still super early.
Very early days, which means it's the perfect time to get started, to get ahead of the
Yes,
curve.
absolutely.
And a few other examples with Alteryx. So Alteryx machine learning could sound intimidating, but actually it's got in-product education mode, which I think is really cool because that means as you're using the platform, you're also learning the concepts behind what you're doing. So that's one way to get up to speed on machine learning just by diving in and using the product. There's also auto insights. So, in many cases, AI is built into products that you're already using, like Gmail, which finishes your email sentences for you. And with Auto Insights, that's one of those products where it actually uses AI and natural language processing to detect patterns in your data set and identify meaningful trends. And then, of course, many of our listeners will be familiar with Intelligence Suite, which is a designer add-on that allows users to unlock insights from computer vision, text mining, and assisted modeling. So if you're a little more advanced, you can have a field day there. So there's a lot of people getting creative in the Alteryx community, and I'm excited to see how they'll keep using Snowflake with Alteryx to keep doing more and more powerful use cases.
Yeah, I saw somebody like created a macro to integrate and then send data over to ChatGPT. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, macros are badass. I love hearing how people are getting creative with Alteryx. And again, it just speaks to the flexibility of the platform. And similarly for Snowflake, Snowflake is flexible. They let you work with data in the way that you want to work with data. So when you combine the two together, you just get access to everything you need from start to finish, and you get to work with it the way you prefer. Well, Ahmad, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I could talk all day about AI and ML with you, and I'm sure you have so many more things you could share. But for now, we've got to wrap up. So thank you so much again for joining me, and I'm excited to see you in a couple weeks at Inspire.
Absolutely looking forward to it. Thank you, Alex, for having me.
Awesome. So for everyone listening, I hope you're convinced now that the AI hype is real and that you have everything you need to get in on the trend with Alteryx and Snowflake. As it happens, Snowflake Summit 2023 is coming up in June, and Alteryx will be there, so it's a great chance to learn more about both. And for show notes from today's conversation, visit community.alteryx.com/podcast. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.